Franck Magennis, the man on the right side of the screen, is a British barrister who represented Hamas in court. He's called Israel a fascist apartheid state, Gaza a concentration camp, and even said October 7th was Palestinians reasserting their humanity. Watch till the end. Is this human rights or defending terrorism?
Let's just remind ourselves what Franck Magennis said yesterday.
Some people still trying to sit on the fence on the question of Zionism. That fence was obliterated by a Palestinian bulldozer on October 7th. There is no fence left to sit on. You are either an anti-Zionist in favour of people who've been herded into a concentration camp and told that they are animals, breaking out of that concentration camp, reasserting their dignity and reasserting their humanity, or you are in favour of the fascists who put them in that concentration camp in the first place.
Franck Magennis joins me now. Good evening, Frank.
Good evening, Peter. It's good to be back. How are you?
Fine, thank you. I just wondered why you believe reasserting their humanity is what Palestinians did on the 7th of October. Why do you believe that's the case, if I'm characterising your words correctly?
Well, the crucial thing to understand is that Israel is governed by fascists, and we know that they're fascist because they tell us that they are. The Israeli finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, has said explicitly that he's a fascist, and it's also the case that Israel's an apartheid state that is engaged in the mass murder of Palestinians.
Okay, let's talk about Hamas. I'm happy to talk about Israel in a second, but in regard to Hamas, you said that Palestinians were reasserting their authority on the 7th of October.
I'm not sure why you're mentioning Hamas. My speech didn't mention Hamas.
Well, you talked about Palestinians there reasserting their humanity on the 7th of October.
Oh, that's interesting. So you just conflated all Palestinians with Hamas.
No, I didn't do that. What I'm saying...
That's
Frank,
the logic of the genocide, isn't it?
Let's have a reasonable conversation, please. The fact is that you said the Palestinians on the 7th of October reasserted their humanity. How do you believe they did that?
It's obviously the case that the fascist apartheid state of Israel herded more than 2 million people into a concentration camp because it views them as a racial threat. And the reason it views them as a racial threat is because they're not Jewish. And so when people find themselves in that situation, it's obviously incompatible with their dignity. No one should be expected to live in those conditions. No one should be told that they're animals. And when you treat people like that, they will always find ways to reassert their humanity and their dignity.
So do you believe that reasserting their humanity was done by running a bulldozer through a fence, flying in on microlights, slaughtering, raping, torturing and kidnapping hundreds of people, not just Israelis, of course, but Thai people, American people, Nepalese people, French people? You believe that's resistance rather than terrorism. Is that correct?
It seems to me that you've chosen to frame this interview in Zionist terms. Is that right?
What I've asked you a reasonable question, and I'm wondering whether you think that's resistance or whether you think that's terrorism or perhaps something else.
Do you think that what you're doing is atrocity propaganda?
I'm the interviewer, I'm asking you the question, and perhaps you would answer the question.
I'm here to suggest that your interview is premised upon extremely racist, anti-Palestinian bigotry, and that you're running cover. Why do
you think that? I mean, is it not the case? Do you believe that it is not the case that a bulldozer went through a fence, that people were raped, tortured, and kidnapped of various nationalities, including Israeli people, but also Nepalese, American, French, and others by Hamas?
The British government is participating in this genocide.
You haven't spoken about Hamas at all, Frank, and you've talked about the British and the Israelis. Why do you keep talking over me? Well, I'd love to, because you're not answering my questions.
I'm here to suggest that you are running atrocity propaganda for a genocide in which your own government is actively participating, and you're doing that because you've chosen to premise this interview on the most disturbing anti-Palestinian racism. Why is it
anti-Palestinian racism to talk about what the terrorist group Hamas did on the 7th of October? Why is that anti-Palestinian racism?
We're 22 months into a genocide that's being enacted by fascists, and you seem to have sided yourself with the fascists. Can you confirm for your viewers that you are in fact anti-fascist and that you oppose the fascists in the apartheid state of Israel as they are engaged in a mass murder of Palestinians?
Barristers have an overriding duty to uphold the administration of justice. Do you believe that your actions outside the courtroom yesterday, which were talking about resistance, which I believe means terrorism, outside the court where a court case based on terrorist offences is taking place? As I say, I don't want to get into the whys and wherefores of that case. I'm sure you as a barrister with a greater legal knowledge than me will know that that is something we shouldn't do because we don't want to prejudice a trial. What I'm wondering is, what's that got to do with the fact? I mean, why have you done that, I suppose, is my question.
Well, I'm here to suggest that Palestinians have a right to use armed force to resist the apartheid state that is committing a genocide against them. That's clear as a matter of international law, but it's not just law. We have to think about how you actually stop a genocide. Think about the most, perhaps,
So are you then saying that what happened on the 7th of October is justified?
Well, you interrupted me again. What I was saying was that the way that you stop a genocide is with military force. And so I'm here to suggest that everyone should be loudly proclaiming their support for the Palestinian right to use armed force to attack the army that's committing a genocide against them. It's also the case that Palestinians should be supported whenever they choose to pursue whatever strategy they want to liberate themselves from the occupation.
I don't think you're answering my questions, Frank. And as a barrister, you will know that in court you ask a witness a question and then they answer it. I just don't think you're answering them. Maybe I'll try another.
Hold on. I'm not your witness.
I didn't say you were. I'm simply saying that you'll be familiar with the concept of an interview. Usually, I ask a question. Usually, you will give me an answer. I think it's a reasonable. Sorry, go ahead.
Your questions are extremely racist against Palestinians.
How?
And I've explained
You haven't told me how.
You're running cover for a genocide of Palestinians that's happening as you and I are speaking, and that specifically is targeting your colleagues in the journalism profession. Hundreds of your colleagues in Palestine are being murdered because they are. 237 journalists last time I counted. Your colleague Anas al-Sharif was murdered by the fascist apartheid state of Israel. You have nothing to say about it.
That is another matter. I'm the one doing the interview. I'm the one doing the interview. I've broadcast about that previously, and my opinions on that are on the record. In regard to resistance versus terrorism, would you argue, or would you say that what happened with the jihadists on the 7th on 7/7 on the 2005 was resistance or terrorism?
The term terrorism may have some use as a matter of politics. As a matter of law, it should be abolished. The Terrorism Act 2000 is in a legitimacy crisis because it keeps being used by the administrators of the British Empire as they commit this genocide to try and attack and suppress speech that criticises them as they do that, right? Let's be clear that your government, the British government...
So I've given you the opportunity to say that the jihadists who committed 7/7 are terrorists. You've said that you've not taken that opportunity. Let me try another one. The Manchester bomber who murdered people, including children, would you call him a terrorist?
You're a disgrace to your profession and you're extremely racist.
I'm asking perfectly reasonable questions which you haven't answered.
No, you're not. You're running atrocity propaganda 22 months into a genocide.
Well, why have you decided to do this interview then, Frank?
I was hoping that you might have some integrity and admit that you made a terrible mistake by embracing the fascist ideology of Zionism and agreeing to apologise to the people of Palestine for embracing. So
speaking of integrity, you're someone who...
You just don't let me finish. You call yourself a journalist, you don't let me talk. It's ridiculous.
You call yourself a barrister. Plenty of people say that you are someone who should apologise to the woman who had family members die on the 7th of October, who you called a Zionist wretch. You also tweeted, "We're going to effing destroy an Israeli arms manufacturer." Would you like to apologise for that?
You're talking about Elbit Systems UK Limited, which is...
Well, let's talk about the woman you called a Zionist wretch, whose family members died on the 7th of October.
I'm not about to talk about that. I do want to talk about what you just raised.
Why not?
Because I'll choose how to answer your questions. Are you going to let me answer?
Well, I'd like you to answer the question about the woman you called a Zionist wretch and why you did that.
Yeah, and I've explained I'm not going to talk about that.
Why
but
not?
I will talk about...
Why are you not going to talk about it? Why will you not apologise to her?
I'm not going to have you spring these questions on me.
I'm not springing the questions. That is something that you're perfectly aware of. That is something that has been a matter of public controversy. You're a controversial barrister. I have been contacted today by a number of members of your profession who say that you, in their view, are not upholding the standards of your profession. What do you make of that?
I came here to talk about the genocide of Palestinians, which is happening as you and I are speaking, and which the company Elbit Systems UK Limited, which I was talking about in the tweet you referenced, that's a subsidiary of an Israeli company. It's a company that Palestine Action existed to attack and defeat, and it's an integral part of the Israeli government's apartheid regime, which, as I've said, is currently governed by fascists. I'm here to suggest that the ideology of Zionism is an inherently racist ideology, and it's a fascist one, and that the time has come for everyone to have the courage to do what Zara Sultana MP did and admit that anyone who embraced Zionism made a terrible mistake, that they were endorsing the logic of the mass murder of Palestinians because they're viewed as a racial threat to the demographic purity of Israel's apartheid state, and that we have to admit that the time has come for us to turn our back as the human family on that fascist ideology, to side unequivocally with the Palestinians as they liberate themselves from that apartheid state as a genocide.
Okay. So you're saying that we should side ourselves unequivocally with the Palestinians. Does that say that we should? Does that mean, in your view, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Frank, but does that mean, in your view, that we should side ourselves unequivocally with Hamas?
There is a distinction in international law between what's called jus ad bellum and jus in bello, right? The reason for the war and the conduct of the war. I think that what's absolutely clear is that Palestinians have a right to engage in armed struggle against an apartheid state while it tries to destroy them. I'm obviously not here to start falling into the traps you're trying to set regarding the Terrorism Act 2000.
They're not traps, they're perfectly ordinary questions.
Yeah, it's just that one side of this debate has to be very careful about what it says, because it might commit a criminal offence, while the other one gets to go on a platform and spout genocide, denial and atrocity propaganda for months and faces no consequences, right? That's the imbalance that the British state that's participating in this genocide has deliberately created. And I'm inviting you to have some courage to challenge the British state instead of engaging in this continued anti-Palestinian racism. It's a genocide, mate. Like, seriously, like, how have you allowed yourself to become so numb to that? Have you lost all humanity? Like, seriously?
I would argue, Frank, well, you're asking me a question, I want to put it back to you. I would argue that to be a humanitarian, what you would do right now is say that what Hamas did on the 7th of October was a lack of humanity, was a horrible, evil act that should not have happened. I would also challenge you to say that any anti-Semitism that happens in this country, including some that you have been accused of by others, should be completely condemned.
You want to be very careful. It's not been shown that I've done anything anti-Semitic.
I haven't said that either. I've said that you've been accused of it.
It's as I've said. You are currently choosing to side with the British government while it commits a genocide. I'm inviting you to do something far more courageous, to admit that you made a mistake by embracing the fascist ideology of Zionism, to apologise to the people of Palestine, and to come out like Zara Sultana did as an anti-Zionist. It's beyond urgent. It's 22 months into a genocide, and you're still talking about October when it started, October 2023.
Do you not think we should talk about it? Do you think we should not talk about the 7th of October?
I think that the 7th of October is being used as atrocity propaganda, and I think that you are personally responsible for spending 22 months propagating atrocity propaganda. You are justifying a genocide, and you will be remembered as such.
I think you'll be remembered too, Frank. I think you'll be remembered very, very clearly. Thank you for joining me.
It's 2025. America's debt is over $37 trillion, and the dollar just had its worst crash since 1973. That puts your savings and your family's future at risk. That's why we trust Alpha Omega Gold, a company that stands unapologetically with Israel and supports Stand Tall Israel. Visit ao.gold/stand to claim your free precious metals wayfinder guide, or call 1-855-426-4653 today. Protect your future before it's too late.